Well, it's interesting times to be speaking to you. And in my last video, I spoke about coronavirus and how it might be shaping our culture and our generation. And in this video, I want to update you about how coronavirus might be impacting the church now and into the future. Well, this global pandemic called COVID-19 or coronavirus has been impacting the church almost on a daily basis. Church after church that I'm aware of have been impacted, particularly in the US, where gatherings of more than 10 people have been closed for the foreseeable future. Here in Australia, our Prime Minister has asked us to have a restriction on gatherings of more than 100 people inside. And so whilst we might think about the big churches that get a lot of news in our ministry circles, and they're pivoting quite quickly to digital platforms, not all of us are going to be covered by that restriction. And today I want to give you perhaps the perspective of a small church pastor where we have 60 people who meet here on a weekly basis. And at the foreseeable future, if the restriction still stays at 100, we have the privilege of being able to gather. But this is not a win for small church pastors. Yes, we can still keep gathering, but it's not a win, and we shouldn't be looking to encourage people from bigger churches to start joining us in our smaller church. We should be praying for our brothers and sisters in the larger churches. And some of the churches are able to pivot quite quickly to church online, and that's because of the resources that they have, that's because of the size that they have. Some of the churches that I can think of in this city of Melbourne have quite quickly been able to pivot to digital. Perhaps they've been exploring it for several months now, and this has been the trigger that they've needed to pivot online. But when I think about some of the churches and the ministries and the ministry leaders that I follow on Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of thing, the ones that you probably watch on YouTube or the Christian music that you stream on YouTube, most of those churches have been impacted by this, and our prayers and thoughts are with them at this time. Even though they may have been preparing for this, it's still a challenge for them. And perhaps the challenge for those churches at this time is how do they offer the pastoral care that smaller churches like us find it really easy to offer. They're now scrambling to try and work out how do you offer pastoral care online? How do you make sure that those people who are elderly that are part of their churches and perhaps don't even regularly check email, how do you offer them pastoral care? It's so much harder for them to jump onto places like Zoom and try and do online connections such as that. So this is not a win for small churches, but it is actually a difficulty for us as a small church to pivot to online. Here in my church, where I'm talking to you from today, we don't even have internet connection in the church. So the idea of streaming a church service is just so much more difficult for us. There's many lessons that we're going to learn over the coming weeks and months. And perhaps we do need to pull the trigger on connecting digitally and not just relying on the fact that we know where our members live. Any given Sunday here at this church, of the 60 people that come to our church, if one of them's not here, I invariably know why they're not here, because either they've let me know or I've seen them during the week. And so that pastoral care that we're so easily able to offer might look a little bit different in the coming weeks. And perhaps we need to get ready for that and start learning from those bigger churches. Perhaps it does give us a bit of time and distance to learn from them, to listen to what they're saying. And this week I was able to participate in a Zoom conference with the head of digital media from Crossway Baptist and learn about some tools and techniques that smaller churches such as ours can use to get online a lot quicker than perhaps if I had to start from scratch and research it myself. But this is going to impact ministry for all of us. It is going to mean that ministry looks a little bit different than how it's looked before. And we could be sad about that. We could have a sense of grief about that. And perhaps as leaders, we do have to listen to the grief that we are feeling as we struggle as human beings to deal with all the news that's going on. And we have the extremes, don't we, in our church, of those who are really panicking about this and want the whole society closed down today. And we have people in our churches who are saying, well, what's the big deal about this? This is a time for us to perhaps look at our own grief as ministry leaders. But it's also a chance for the church to shine. People are looking for meaning in ways that they just have not been open to before. For example, I heard about Connexus Church that this week have transitioned to online church services. They normally have 1,000 people meeting in their church and perhaps about 1,000 people checking out their church online. This Sunday, when they pivoted wholly to church online, they had 8,500 people check out their online church service. That's a unprecedented online connection. Now, I'll admit that maybe some of those are small churches that were not able to live stream, and so they were checking in those bigger churches. But I'm sure that there are non-Christians or people who are nominally Christian and don't go to church that are checking out these online services. This is an opportunity for us to pivot into new ways of doing ministry now and into the future. And we shouldn't just be waiting for when COVID-19 is all wrapped up and done and we go back to the way that we've always been doing church. We need to actually see that maybe God intends to use this for the benefit of his kingdom. Now, if we think about John chapter 12, we hear that Jesus is crying out to his Father, and we hear this audible voice in John chapter 12 where he says, I have glorified my name and I will glorify my name again. You see, God will bring glory to his name. Jesus said that he would build his church and the gates of hell won't overcome it. And I really believe that this time that we're going through is one opportunity for Jesus to build his church. It's not going to look the same as it was before, and I believe it's going to be stronger than it was before. I believe that many of us are now going to pull the trigger on digital methods that will help us to share the gospel in new ways and innovative ways. And I think we should all be praying that the church is innovative in days such as these. But I finish with this idea that Jesus said that he'd come to bring light to the darkness and that the darkness won't overcome it. You see, our world is going through a period of darkness at the moment, and we shouldn't be celebrating that as an opportunity to spread the gospel, but we should be bringing light into the darkness. We shouldn't be celebrating that people are panicking because they're turning to the church. We should actually be accompanying them through that fear and through that panic in the same way that Jesus showed compassion on people that he encountered in his ministry. Ministry is going to look a little bit different, but Jesus is coming to bring light into the darkness. This is a wonderful opportunity for the church to shine at such a time as this. And my prayer, particularly if you're in a small church, I wish you every blessing, and to my brothers and sisters in the larger churches that are pivoting much quicker than I am to the digital platforms. My prayer is that God would bless your ministries and that you would be a blessing to the church. So look after one another. Stay safe, and every blessing to your ministry now and into the future. Well, if you found this video helpful, how about you hit the like button below and maybe subscribe to this channel so that you can get more tips for your next communication, public speaking, talks and speeches.